Again, my name is Scott Akin. I'm an Extension and Research Entomologist from Southeast Research Extension Center. I wasn't planning on coming here to tell you everything we have going on down there, but we have quite a bit going on in our extension program and research as well. I also do have some teaching responsibilities as well. So, but as junior faculty, I try to plan on writing a grant someday and like to improve myself as much as I can, so I figured last November I was asked to sit on a grant review panel, although technically I'd written one for school, but I hadn't written an official one yet, and I thought, well, how bad can that be, going through a review process, even though I've never really written one. And although we were sent the review, the grants, the proposals that were assigned 3 weeks ahead of time, due to, I heard Terry early talk about procrastination. This is what I called forced procrastination. I didn't start looking at them until the Monday before the trip to Washington. And after the first proposal, after I got through with it, I felt that I got to a situation that I felt like I couldn't get out of. So I thought if I tried to back out of this, it'd be an embarrassing situation. But due to some work at the house and some heavy office work and work that weekend, I was able to finally get caught up there. So, but what I wanted to share with you today, even with my limited experience with grants and grant proposals, was my recent experience from a new guy perspective. Okay, and this was for NIFA, the National Institute of Food and Agriculture Pest Management Alternatives Program review process. And all I want to do today is share with you what I learned, and you may know a lot of this already, so bear with me, but I learned a great deal from this trip. And when I'm ready to write my first grant proposal, I'll be ready, a lot more ready than I was. So it was an outstanding experience for me. But I just wanted to run this by you to kind of get you mentally prepared to try to increase the chances of your proposal being funded. So. It goes through a three-step process. First of all, there's a staff screening. It's just a screening process, is all it is. And I've heard some folks mention earlier to follow the RFA, and I'll talk about that a little bit later about how important that is. But it's basically just a screening, and this year they had 93, I think they said it was a record of 93 or 94 proposals that were turned in, and they only took 60, so the others that were cut were because the RFA wasn't followed very well, so that's very important. The second part is a relevancy review. The 4 IPM centers convenes a relevancy panel looking at these different projects, and all they do, they don't look at the science or how it's written, they just look at the problem and say, well, how important is this? So you want to make sure that whatever that your proposal is addressing, you want to make sure that it's an important problem regionally. And third, this is what I was involved in, the technical review. Primary, secondary, and tertiary reviewers is what's involved here. I'll talk about that a little bit later, but this is when it really gets picked apart and it really gets looked at from a technical perspective. Under that technical review, we looked at the science, just the general overall science that was throughout the proposal, outreach and education delivery plan that they had, the plan of work of the research itself, the general organization of the proposal and the work, and relevant application as well. We looked at that, although the relevancy panel also had a rating, we also looked at that as well. And then when we got through, the primary reviewers particularly, we rated from excellent to poor for overall rating, and in between that was high, medium, and low priority respectively. So all of the above was then entered into a peer review system by the primary reviewer, and even the secondary and tertiary as well, and then submitted it for the trip to wherever they meet. In this particular case, the panel met at Washington, D.C. Again, this was just a short while back, but applications are addressed in numerical order. The primary reviewer leads the discussion. And this might also help you if you've never served on anybody. How many folks have served on a review panel? So is this sounding about the same so far? I've had some folks in the room that have done it 27 times, and a guy next to me that it was his first time as well, and then someone else that had done it 7 or 8 on the other side of me, and he said that a lot of it was really similar, but another one said it's kind of different from others that I've seen. Got a question?
Yeah, numerical order, is that order received?
I'm not sure. I know it's the numbers that was assigned by the PMAT program or by NIFA, but I'm not sure whether that was how they were received or not, or if it's random. I'm not sure how that was. So, Again, after the primary reviewer leads the discussion of each particular grant, the secondary and tertiary reviewers then provide their overall ratings, whether it's good, fair, excellent, poor, and they add anything overlooked by the primary reviewer or the secondary reviewer in the tertiary reviewer's case. Reviewers are then asked as a group to prioritize the proposal from outstanding to do not fund, and then there's excellent, good, and fair, and low priority in that as well. So what we had is we had a big wall with yellow post-it notes with the grant number and kind of a short title of what the proposal was, and then we had the listings of excellent all the way down to do not fund, and then there was a lot of this floating back and forth, and they'd say, tell me, what do you want, where do you want to put it, and then we all kind of look around at each other and a little bit to the right, and then once we got about 30-40 grants up there, we were like, well, just kind of move it to the middle of this one, and then we had a bunch of them bunched together, so it was quite an experience there. But once the first reviews are made, once we looked at all 63 reviews, and they were all on the wall there in front of us, we were then able to go from the medium priority over to the left all the way through to excellent, and then we kind of went through them again. So it was a lengthy process. It took a few days, but then once we prioritized them accordingly, we took the top 8 in this particular case. I guess it depends on how many they want to fund, but took the top 8 proposals that were to the farthest to the left. So, and again, it took a lot longer than, it's easier said than done, I'll put it that way. So. Once that part is done, the primary reviewer, which we had 4, I had 4, everybody in the room had 4 proposals in which they were the primary reviewer, and they prepare a written panel summary, and then they enter it into the NEFA website. The summary consists of basically of the description of reviews, and also more importantly for if you want to resubmit and if it didn't get funded, suggestions on how to improve the proposal for future submissions. But we also had a suggestion or two even if the proposal was to be funded. These are the technical evaluation criteria that I thought was important to show. Appropriate and clearly stated research and outreach objectives. The next slide I'll be showing some of the things that I wrote down that doomed proposals to make sure when I write my first proposal that I don't do that. So I'll be showing that in a little bit, but these were actually the stated technical evaluation criteria. Methodology and analytical approach is appropriate to project objectives. Involvement of appropriate relevant expertise, and that was important. That's basically, there were some proposals that had an entomologist and a nematologist working together, for example. I can't talk specifically about the specific proposals because of confidentiality issues, but they might have a weed component also in there, but no weed scientist, for example. So that's one of the examples of that particular point. Experience of key personnel. That's basically the person that's heading it up. It kind of helps if they have experience, a lot of experience with that particular topic. Feasibility of obtaining objectives during the project period, and this was a big one. I thought there were some really good projects that I thought were great, but they had to be done in 2 years, and especially if you're a field entomologist, particularly from my expertise, I suppose it seems like 2 years is kind of a tight window, but there were some good ones that they said they were going to get it done in 2 years, and we kind of looked at it and said, well, I don't know, that's going to take a little longer than that. So, appropriateness of the budget. We had one that, for example, that was seemed like they were asking a little bit much for what the objectives were, and we all kind of talked about it, and we went for it line by line and said, well, that's a little much on that particular case. Oddly, though, it was funny, there were some of them that were not a lot of money asked for, and folks went, oh, that one looks good, So, adherence to the proposal guidelines is also very important, and again, the RFA is very important in this particular case. Okay, so see, these are some of the points that I found during this process. Again, with keeping in mind that one day I want to write my own proposal fairly soon, is that I kept a running list next to my laptop while we were doing this whole deal, and anytime somebody said, well, my problem with this proposal was this, and I just wrote it down, and my list was about twice as long, but I picked out some of the ones that I thought were the most important or the ones that had more impact. Few support letters or poor support letters. Some had no support letters at all. Some had only one that was by somebody down the hall. Some of the proposals that had really good support letters, had anywhere from 4 to 8 support letters, and they were from different types of organizations. They were from industry, university, they're from out of state even. I didn't get so hung up on the out of state, but some of the other reviewers said that they like to see support letters from other states. No future to forward thinking, of course. You need to be thinking about the project, the particular problem that you're trying to tackle. Again, lack of a good team involved. Just kind of, I talked about that earlier, about having maybe a multidisciplinary team, especially if you're trying to tackle multiple issues. Well thought out and stated objectives. Again, I've already mentioned that, but there were times when the proposal seemed all over the place. It seemed to be well written, but it didn't really focus on a particular problem, and the objectives weren't stated very well. Weak relevance statement. This is important to the problem, and this particularly applies to the relevancy panel. There's a relevance statement that needs to be made that basically shows how important, you're arguing how important this research is. Okay. Again, I talked about this already a couple of times, and I've seen it in a couple of previous talks. Did not follow the RFA to the letter. We had some that they just, again, they already cut 30 of them before they went into the review process, but there were some that made it into the review process that didn't follow the RFA. And there were some maybe things you might think are ticky-tack too that simply got a lower rating simply because they didn't follow the RFA. So make sure you do that. That's very important. I thought that was good advice somebody gave earlier about the RFA, about going through the whole process of writing your proposal, could keep checking back with the RFA. That's probably how I would do it. Funding not fairly allocated for each particular component. That was tough. We had a lot of folks, and I heard this mentioned earlier as well, sometimes, I'm an entomologist and with some weed science background as well, and I was getting some topics, and I'm a crop entomologist and crop weed scientist, so fruit trees and nematodes and other crops, and I thought, man, it's kind of tough to review that, but as far as trying to give it a fair review, but it was a good process, but still trying to find out what you have there for your experience. The ideas need to be novel but not crazy. I have that written down because, and again, I can't talk about it specifically, but it needs to be novel, being that it needs to be, do a good literature review first and make sure that it hasn't been done in any way. But then I wish I could, when I say crazy, I wish I could tell you exactly what, but we got a couple of them that were pretty crazy, involving some nutty stuff. So I wish I could talk about it, but I can't. So not off the wall where it sounds like robotics and stuff. I don't know. I better not say much more. But anyway, the proposal, we had a few that were just plain not well written or not in sufficient detail. And one of the things that we saw, the ones that weren't in sufficient detail, there were some that were not in detail, and there was an 18-page maximum that you could use, and they were only had written 10 pages, and that seemed to be a pet peeve of more than one reviewer, that it wasn't in detail and they didn't even use their full 18 pages. So try to go in as much detail as you can, and if you have a maximum of 16 to 18 pages, go ahead and use as much as you can, as long as you give that detail. Again, lack of a thorough literature review. We had some of that in a few of them, and that was a strike against some of them. Poor technology transfer plan, and again, could not be completed realistically in 2 years. So again, these are just some of the things that I wrote down myself, just for my own future reference, and although I'm not a big veteran like the gentleman that did 27 grant review panels that I knew there, I hope this helps everybody out.